Hello and welcome to the Lost Boys podcast. I'm Tandy, joined by Harlan Fear. Say hi, Harlan.
Hi, Harlan.
And this week's episode, maybe not as explosive as last week's episode after your, enormous win at the Lost Boys Lorcana Invitational, but still had a tournament to go to this week, yeah?
Yeah. I went to our wonderful sponsors, Games and Comics Paradise in Fairfax, Virginia. We had 53 competitors for what ended up being a 2K prize event. And yeah, everybody I played against was having a ton of fun. It was just a great atmosphere. It was really interesting getting like feedback from my opponents early on in the tournament that like out of my first 4 rounds before I started drawing was only one of my opponents actually was a Magic player. Everyone else was like new to card games with Lorcana, which was really cool.
That's awesome. And, we always love to see new blood jump into the water just to have a little bit better competition, right? Like the more the merrier. And, we've been so used to having a competitive tournament scene in Magic for, most of my life. And trying to cultivate one and create one for Lorcana has been, a little challenging, but it's been a lot of fun. And hearing that actually just really warms my heart.
Yeah, it was super fun. It was awesome. Especially with the pre-match while you're shuffling up, you ask, your opponent's name, where are you from, what do you do, how long you've been gaming, do you play Magic, because Lorcana's new, it's not how long have you been playing Lorcana. And then there was definitely some intimidation factor for my opponents when it's like, yeah, I've played Magic for 21 years now. And that was, definitely a different experience. So it was fun.
Well, we had a lot of that, back in the day playing on the SCG tour and stuff for Magic the Gathering where, we'd sit down and our opponents would be like, well, how long have you been playing? I've only been playing since this set, and this set came out a year ago. Like, well, I've been playing since before you were born. and yeah, that feels bad or whatever, but it also feels good, like you have that shared sense of competition, but you're maybe having different starting points and different experiences along the way. So, I mean, I don't know. All walks of life, it's just goes around in circles, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so to kick off the podcast this week, we're going to get into the nitty-gritty from the Games and Comics Paradise tournament, as well as the metagame, winners, decklists, and things like that. But before we get started, Harlan, I think it's time to do one of my favorite segments, and that's Ask Harlan Anything! All right, every week I'm going to pick a question from various sources of Twitter, YouTube comments, and what. I'm going to pick my favorite question, and I'm going to ask it to you. And right now we have a question from C Fusion PM, a.k.a. Matt, and he says, Harlan, what are you planning to build week 1 after Rise of the Floodborn releases? Are you going to upgrade your existing deck or try something totally different?
That is a great question. I'm sure I will probably come back to working on the Amber Sapphire ramp deck with new cards. But week 1, definitely what I will absolutely be trying is the new 6-cost Beast. We can definitely get that up on the screen.
Beast Relentless, that thing's a heater.
Yeah, 4/5 quests for 2 readies whenever an opposing character takes damage. I definitely will be starting with that card because I think that card is incredible. And I will definitely be pairing with Steel to start because that's the easiest way to deal damage to your opposing characters. Namely combo would definitely be Beast singing, grab your sword because it readies immediately.
Yeah. No, I love that. Just the sing it, untap it. Sing it, untap it. It feels pretty fun. I like that it can, kind of just run down a bunch of smaller characters with this ability because every time it challenges, like a Simba Protective Cub, and, it'll ready itself again once it's dealt damage as long as it still has willpower left. On top of mixing it, obviously, with Steel to do those direct damage effects, how do you feel about maybe pairing it with, say, something like Amber so you can use Rapunzel to heal it like in the middle of those chains?
Yeah, I think that is definitely somewhere that it will maybe end up because, the very first thing I like to do when I start building a deck, especially around a powerful card, is just try and break it. Like, just go as hard as you possibly can on the powerful interaction and then see how strong that is. And then, if it's weak to your opponent's interaction or something like that, that's where you dial it back and, try and put more good cards in and like elongate your plan. So like I could definitely see down the road moving towards Amber to get, Rapunzel in my deck. So I have a better long game and stuff like that. But definitely early, I'm definitely just going to be slamming Grab Your Sword with that beast.
Yeah, I actually have a deck built that I do want to show you that is a Steel and Emerald Beast deck. It actually is like very light on cards from Emerald, and instead is just like playing tons of these new Steel cards that are in Chapter 2. And, we'll be hopefully playing some later this evening and then posting it up next week on our YouTube, so make sure to check that out. As far as upgrades for the Amber Sapphire deck from Chapter 2, is there anything in the new set that stands out to you as like, this should definitely go into my deck? Like, are you interested in maybe the Cogsworth package?
Yeah, so Cogsworth is definitely interesting. That's a specific interaction that has not been too big of an issue, as you could see from a lot of the coverage of the Invitational.
Because you already have high willpower, right?
Exactly. So I don't really need the resist spread across my characters. A card that actually I am pretty excited about is the new Cruella. That is just a 2-cost 3/2. I think she has an additional ability where she gains support or evasive. But really just the 2-cost 3/2 is such a big upgrade to Philatides for being able to clear Simbas early. So that's a card I'm pretty excited about for the ramp deck. And then there's a new removal spell that just got previewed, I think today.
I saw it.
Yeah, I don't remember the name because I just briefly saw it, but it's 3-cost. It's a song, so you can sing it, and then it's banish a chosen character with strength 5 or higher.
Yeah, so it's actually not even on Dreamborn yet. It's very, very new, but
it's a mystery.
Yeah,
so go ahead.
Well, okay, I'll say this. In Magic, we've had cards like this before. The one that pops in my head immediately is Reprisal. It's a white and 1, destroy a creature with power 4 or greater. And it was very common for the color white in Magic to be able to destroy things that had high power. It was like, the small knight conquering the large dragon or what have you. And this feels very similar, and it's a song also, so you can actually just sing with like a 3-cost character to destroy a large character from your opponent for very, very cheap. The one downside is that it doesn't kill Carefree Surfer because it only has 4 strength. That could be maybe an issue.
There's actually a solution to that, Todd.
Tell me about
characters with support can target your opponent's characters.
Don't lie to me. That's not true. That's never come up before. I didn't know that. Yep. And now,
yeah, you can grow their thing and then blast it.
Okay, I like blasting. That sounds fun.
Yeah, so that's a fun interaction that I could see coming up, especially in the Amber Sapphire deck, where I could see going up on more Maximus or maybe actually playing Philatides because there's now that upside of Phil plus this new removal spell. Because Let It Go is good and functional.
I have
but it is. You found it?
World's Greatest Criminal Mind, and it's a song.
Great name.
Yeah, it's a song, and it costs 3. We'll get it on screen. I'm sure you'll see it. World's Greatest Criminal Mind, 3-cost inkable action song from Amber. Does banish chosen character with 5 strength or more. So yeah, if you can put some support on your opponent's stuff and blast them, that sounds great.
Yeah, and it's inkable. So, the downside is not really that high. It's a song, so it's another hit off of Aerial to make your aerials better so that you don't have to hit that feel bad situation of playing your 3-drop that doesn't have the best stats and then just looking at the bottom 4 cards of your deck of all those sweet cards that you don't get to draw now.
Mm-hmm.
But
all right, so a lot of new cards coming in Chapter 2. I think we have a little less than 100 cards previewed thus far, and the set is still, over 100 cards left to be previewed, and many of them I think are going to be the inkable kind of generic weaker things, but those end up being the building blocks of a lot of decks, and what we've been getting a lot of previews of is these like high variance, high impact characters and songs and actions and items that aren't inkable. And real talk, at some point, it's going to break, and like you're not going to be able to play any more uninkables in your deck. And so adding another set with more uninkables doesn't necessarily mean that you change your deck. It just means that you just change your uninkables out, like which ones you can actually play, and you're just like trying to find better ones, because as we know from building decks thus far, most of these strategies, generically speaking, need roughly 44, 45 inkables.
Yeah, actually, honestly, the thing that I am most looking forward to is that, you know, we're only one chapter into this game, and these decks are like, a lot of them are pretty well tuned already. And, you know, like my ramp deck has, you know, Mr. Smee, which is definitely a good role player, but definitely a filler card that's just there because it's a good stats rate.
Yeah.
And those types of cards are definitely going to be what is easily replaced moving forward, I think. And what's crazy to think about is that we have these decks that are at this point where they look like a typical constructed deck already, and then we're doubling the card pool with one chapter. Like that's the mind-blowing part, is we're actually, it's not just a set is coming out. We're doubling the card pool when these decks are already dynamic and there's different archetypes within color pairs. It's going to be crazy.
Yeah, I really like the direction that it's going. I mean, we've talked about the unequal balance mechanic in the game quite a bit already, but I think that it's important to maintain like card integrity, for example. Like it's very difficult to make a card like Goons, a 1-cost 2/2 inkable that quests for 1, and then just like give it an extra point of willpower, and then just call it something else. The moment you do that, you invalidate most of the characters that could be printed as a generic cheap thing. And then so you start to have to look at the other facets that make the card playable. Is it inkable? Is it Dreamborn, Floodborn, and does that matter? And then you have to look at like, can I shift onto this character? And so like the moment you start seeing the connections, the little 1-2 combos, you add more depth to your strategy. But every time one of those things is uninkable, it's putting more and more stress on how you build your deck and how your deck's going to function as the games go.
Yeah, absolutely. I look so forward to how they, as we get all these characters, how they balance and move the numbers around because of that third stat. Like you and I coming from Magic, you know, there's mana cost, power and toughness, and then the ability. Mm-hmm. But here we have ink cost, willpower and strength, and then we have the lore count on top of the ability. That extra stat being thrown into the mix gives them so much more room to move all these numbers around and just get to these really cool cards and places where they aren't necessarily invalidating something, on top of the things like shift and future considerations with the cards.
You know, one card that they printed recently was something that I just kind of called shotted a month ago, and that's at what stage do you have to make a character cost 2 and be able to quest for 3? And they answered that, and it's an unequable 1/1, and it's an amethyst. And so I think that if you put that card into Amber, for example, with Simba Protective Cub as bodyguard, and with that color having bodyguard as a primary mechanic, I think that the moment you do that, you kind of turn the game on its head, the way that, you know, Lilo is better than Maleficent biding her time. You know, a Pinocchio that's in Amber versus a Pinocchio that's in Amethyst is significantly different. And so you have to always take into consideration, like, what can I surround this card with? And the Pinocchio, the 2-cost questing for 3, maybe that's going to be really great in just like a all-in aggressive strategy where you just throw away characters to quest at will. But the moment you put that type of thing into another color, it changes the dynamic of the games, and it's pretty dangerous. And so, like, where do they go from here? Like, you know, they made a 2-cost 1/1 that quests for 3. So, like, what's next? Is it an O1 that quests for 4? Is it like an O3 that quests for 3, but like your opponent gains a lore when you do it or something? Like, there's a lot of different ways you can move it.
Yeah, and there's also other ways to balance it too, like you mentioned with, shying away from Amber because of Simba Protective Cub. It's funny that they actually maybe have more space for that in a color like Sapphire, where, if you printed, say, a 2-cost uninkable 0/1 that quests for 4, Sapphire has no way to protect that.
Right.
I mean, they have Cogsworth to give it resist or whatever, but that's not, it's really cool that they can just, shift around like that and do different things. And I'm super excited to see more of it in the future.
All right. Well, great question there from our friend. And thank you so much, Harlan, for the Ask Harlan Anything segment. And I'm glad to get your insight on Chapter 2 and how to upgrade your decks. Our next segment is going to be another good one. I don't know. I was going to say it's my favorite, but I already said Ask Harlan Anything is my favorite. But this one is going to be...
this one can be my favorite for you.
It's Card of the Week. All right, Harlan, what's your card of the week?
So my card of the week is actually Stitch Rockstar.
Yo, that's my man right there.
I know, it's your boy. It's really funny. So for this, the tournament we'll be breaking down in depth later. I obviously I was just going to play the same deck again. I did think about playing Amber Steel. I played a little bit on ladder, and then I got mushed a couple times, and I was like, man, this deck sucks. I'm going to play my sweet deck. And then, I was mushing everybody with that. So, of course, that's what I'm going to play, right?
Right.
And so Nathan Stoyer, who played in the Invitational, lives like 15 minutes from the store in Fairfax. So, he messaged me and was like, hey, are you going to be coming still? Are you going to play ramp? And I was like, yeah, of course. He was like, any changes? And I sent him that I was cutting Stitch Rockstar, actually. And I was going to play 0 because, we were kind of low on it after the event. We were kind of just playing it partly because it was open deck list. And then our opponents would know that we had the potential to shift Rockstars on top of our other Stitches to make them additional threats so that they have to remove those before other things. And they added some extra power level to our Hades Lord of the Underworlds. And, so moving forward, I was like, I'm just going to cut these, get some more slots for the cards I do like. And then, I was thinking about it and I was like, I'm just going to play like 10 games on ladder with 4 of them in my deck, and a game that happened against actually Kurt Spies at the Invitational was that I was on the play and I just went turn 1 Stitch New Dog, turn 2 1 jump ahead, turn 3 shift Rockstar onto it.
Game
and I
over.
looked up at him and I said, who's the Rockstar deck now? And it was really good. Like it died basically immediately where he traded off his board for it plus played a smash on it. But I had already ramped and I traded, my 2 cards for his 2 cards and he missed his turn 3. So that was just a huge advantage for me. And I was like, maybe I should just be doing that more often. And it gives me something to kind of mulligan into, and kind of assemble. And then if it doesn't come together, 1 jump is just a great card that I always want to play on turn 2 anyway. And then the other 2 pieces are inkable. And
yeah.
That's all she wrote.
No, I mean, you don't got to sell me on Stitch Rockstar. Old New Dog, me and him, he was the best man at my wedding. And Rockstar was the invited guest to come, play the...
Yeah, he was the wedding singer.
Right. So, to kind of go along with your card of the week, my card of the week is actually something you often find alongside Stitch Rockstar as well. And that's Lantern. And Lantern is my card of the week because specifically one of the decks we're going to be talking about from the GCPO Dice tournament plays 4 copies. And I think that it is one of the reasons why Carefree Surfer is as good as it is in Amber. I know that you're playing 1 jump ahead instead in the Sapphire builds, but when you're not playing Sapphire, Lantern can be your ramp effect for just playing Amber. And Amber is so good at playing really heavy on characters that you can utilize Lantern not only to ramp out, but you can use it on the turn you play it, so it kind of effectively makes it cost 1 in a lot of spots. It's great alongside Stitch New Dog and Stitch Rockstar. It's excellent for getting that Carefree Surfer online quickly And when you're wheeling with, whole new world and things like that, I mean, Lantern's just free resources, and it's just good. I know it's not inkable, but when you're playing for Carefree Surfer, it's easy.
Yeah, it doesn't need to be. It basically is ink on its own. Honestly, I just copied their homework on the 4 Lantern into the 4 Rockstars, right?
Yeah.
That's where I got the idea was, I could just be turn 3 Rockstarring too. And sure, I don't have the characters to, take advantage of his ability, but just a 3/5 3-point quester is huge early. And just being able to sing Let It Go on their Rockstar too is huge.
Yeah.
And,
Rockstar
Lantern just does the same thing, arguably better. Where I have to play 1 jump ahead because of cards like Bell, Strange but Special. Where Lantern, you get to use the resource generation the turn you play it. So I would say Lantern actually is a more powerful card than 1 jump ahead.
They both have their strengths and weaknesses. Obviously, having physical ink matters for Bell Strange with Special, and in the future, maybe there'll be more cards that have bonuses when you have 7 ink or 10 ink in the inkwell, aside from Bell Strange with Special. And then cards like Mickey Mouse Detective and 1 Jump Ahead will be stellar. They're already pretty good, obviously. They're kind of like the core concept of Sapphire in general. And now we're just waiting on more payoffs to ramp into is all, right?
Absolutely.
All right. Well, that's card of the week. Lantern and Stitch Rockstar, 2 cards that have more than helped define Chapter 1 constructed. I believe next week we'll be doing card of the weeks mostly on new cards. And we're going to be playing with some of those new cards coming up in some Lost Boys Versus next week. And hopefully some of those new cards will stand out and shine through. But for now, the tournament that we have been alluding to for the first half of the podcast today is the Games and Comics Paradise 2K Open. And you were there, Harlan. Why don't you give us a rundown of your experience, and I'll just chime in when I can.
Yeah, absolutely. So it was 53 people, which was awesome, especially for a Sunday versus a Saturday. That is just massive. They're definitely going to be running more of these events. So if you aren't following GNC Paradise on Twitter, definitely do that. You can follow us on Twitter too at Lost Boys LOR. We'll always be, broadcasting for them and blasting the events. I'll probably just about always be at another one of these. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it was just an awesome turnout. It was a very smoothly run event. We had a Magic judge running the Melee software for us, and they were awesome. I actually pulled the judge aside to commend him on just how amazing he actually was. I told him he gave the best players meeting of any players meeting I've ever been to, and I've been to maybe 1,000. It's definitely in the high
1,000.
I mean, think about how many tournaments you've played in.
Look, I actually checked the ELO project for the SCG Tour. Someone has a Patreon where they do that, and I have far and away the most matches played out of anyone on the SCG Tour, and my match count is 1,400 or something, and that means my match count being 1,400 means that I've been to 110 round events or whatever.
114 rounds.
So I guess 207 rounders or whatever. Yeah. Okay. So even still, that's only 200 player meetings. I think you're maybe exaggerating a little, but
yeah.
The
so
point
probably
stands.
Not 1,000, but a few hundred at least. And yeah, it was awesome. The store was really great. The players were all really nice. I think that is maybe having to do with Lorcana. It definitely felt even more inviting than a Magic tournament usually does. It was also cool seeing a lot of people I know from that area that do play Magic that have also made the jump to Lorcana. And a couple of additional ringers from the Invitational came out to battle also. I already mentioned before that Nathan Stoyer came out to play.
The former world champion of Magic the Gathering, Nathan Stoyer, 2022 world champion. His invitational card is going to be coming out soon, I think, his custom card.
Yeah, that'll be sweet. And then also we had Kurt Spies in attendance.
Yeah, Kurt made top 8 of the Lost Boys Lorcana Invitational as well with Amber Steel Stitch Blitz. And his deck actually is the one I was talking about. That's playing 4 copies of Lantern.
Yep, absolutely. Kurt is an incredible deck builder, from Magic, Lorcana, some Dragon Ball Z card games, Pokemon, just a crazy, well-rounded gamer. And he has come to play in Lorcana. He's not messing around, and he ended up taking down the tournament. We should be able to get his list up on the screen. He has the 4 lanterns, 4 rock stars, tons of whole new world action, and he plays his deck less like an aggressive deck and way more like a combo deck of Amber Steel.
Right.
You'll notice. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say the combo aspect that you're talking about. It's basically just emptying your hand as quickly as possible using Aerial Spectacular Singer to play a whole new world to refresh. If you're able to, get your whole hand out before your opponent's able to get a few cards out, you're just generating a huge burst of resources while they're discarding 4 or 5 cards.
Yeah, exactly. He also, as having 4 lanterns, doesn't have the uninkable count to also have Lilo, making a wish. And so there's no Lilos, so that aggressive draw is really diminished, but it's made up for by being able to, lantern into Rockstar on 3, which it puts you wildly ahead. I can't imagine you lose very many games where you put a Rockstar in on 3. And then he has cards like Simba Future King. Is that the 1-drop?
Yeah, Future King is the looter.
Yep. Yeah, it comes into play in loots, but with Rockstar, you effectively get to draw 2 and discard 1 with it, which really lets you churn through your deck, assemble, an important combo, which is typically against especially decks like my ramp deck, where you double grab your sword in a turn. It helps you piece those together, get rid of those whole new worlds that may or may not be good, find them if they are good. And yeah, it feels like a well-oiled machine when it's working, and it's really impressive.
Yeah, I think that Amber Steel Stitch Blitz is my pick for like best deck from Chapter 1 constructed, but I don't know the optimal build, and I think that the optimal build is flexible within a given metagame, but it's very clear that Kurt, has tested a lot and figured something out that maybe I don't know. And the Simba Future Kings, for me, when I was doing a lot of my early testing, I ended up dismissing it because whenever I would start doing my big chain turns, I wanted my characters to have some amount of staying power so that if my opponents were challenging them, they were operating almost as a full card. Whereas the characters like Future King, while they loot and they can loot away some of these, uninkable, expensive things, and they can quest for 1, when you're playing them off of Stitch Rockstar, yes, they look great, but they don't have substance. And so I wrote them off early, but I also didn't realize how much that aspect didn't matter when you're doing Rockstar stuff. And there's obviously some give and take, but watching him play with the Simba Future Kings with Rockstar active just really showcased how he was able to easily churn through to find more triggers for the Stitch Rockstar, whereas my builds would often draw 1 or 2 cards and get stuck from having those big uninkables, like the 8 songs that cost 5 from Steel.
Yeah, absolutely. I would be surprised if Simba Future King wasn't his most inked card also, but it is also the card that stands out to me the most about how his deck is constructed, where in those games, once you Rockstar, it's just the best card you can find, basically. And it's just incredible, the difference in the two. And I think that's what's so brilliant about the way he built his deck, is that he identified that, yeah, this card is really mopey on its own, and I really don't want to play it very often, but, it's ink, and I need to ink something pretty much every turn. And then this is also the best thing I can be doing with my rock stars.
No, great points. And, I feel foolish for having missed it before the event, but Kurt showed up to the Lost Boys Lorcana Invitational playing very close to the same 60 and made top 8 there. And, this like slightly more tuned version ended up winning the Games and Comics Paradise event. And not surprising considering the caliber of player and how well he played the deck at the event itself.
Yep. We did kind of blow into, Kurt winning the event. There were additional decks, obviously, in the top 8. So
Look,
there was.
just because we go over the winner deck first doesn't mean we can't talk about the other ones. Look, card of the week, Lantern for
Yep.
me. He had 4 Lantern with those Carefree Surfers, turn 3 Rockstar all over the place, making great use of the Simbas, not only to just like have more explosive starts with the early Rockstars, but also just more things to play off Lantern if you just really need to churn. And so I don't know. I want to give a big shout out to Kurt, and we could talk about the other decks, but I wanted to get that one out of the way.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So we did have Kurt on the Lantern build of Amber Steel songs, and then we had, I believe, 3 other Amber Steels or 2 other Amber Steels that were the more aggressive builds, and then we had an Emerald Amethyst aggro deck, an Emerald Amber aggro deck that mushed me in top 8. Me and Nathan playing Amber Sapphire Ramp, and then we also had an Amber Sapphire mid-range deck that was not, the ramp plan. They were playing the Simba Protective Cubs and the Maximuses, and kind of playing a more mid-game focused game, but still having those Carefree Surfers and Hades Cunning Schemers to get over the top.
No, I mean that sounds cool. It seems like a pretty healthy metagame, but it seems like Amber is just the color that most people want to play. Specifically, you said it was Amber Emerald that gave you trouble.
Yeah, so that's what I played against in top 8. I didn't know what they were playing when we started our match. I did kind of, as we talked about in our last episode, how Dawn was mulliganing when she played her aggressive deck.
Mm-hmm.
But I knew my opponent was playing an aggro deck. I didn't know it was specifically Amber Emerald, so I was kind of tunneling pretty hard on assembling my Rockstar, like early Rockstar plan. And game 1, I kind of got punished for mulliganing like 5 cards, and I drew 2 of my 7-drop Hades really early, and I missed my 5th ink.
Wow,
And
that's
just
brutal.
I felt dead, and then I drew a 3rd one, and I did die. And then the second game, I did manage to turn 3 Rockstar on the play, but the same thing happened where I had to skip my 6th ink drop to play a Maleficent uninvited with 2 Hades in my hand as my only cards. And it felt not good, I have to tell you. It was kind of a disaster.
That was kind of my experience. Whenever Decklists were available for the Lost Boys Invitational, y'all 3 playing the same deck had me and my man Frank Carson curious, and so we played your deck a bit on ladder, and I kept having like 2 or 3 Hades in my hands after I mulligan, and like just having a reasonable amount of uninkables. So like it warms my heart that you also have trouble with that sometimes, and maybe there's hope for us all.
Yeah, so I actually think it was a part of an issue with my plan fundamentally going into those games where I was mulliganing so aggressively, where at the Invitational, I would kind of determine a plan with my opening 7 and then mulligan accordingly to that plan versus deciding a plan and then mulliganing to try and hit that plan regardless of what my initial 7 looked like. And that's where I was getting burned. So I think different archetypes have to do that differently. And that was actually something I learned from this event. Unfortunately, I learned it in the elimination rounds instead of the Swiss, where I didn't even lose a game.
Oh yeah, you're
humble brags.
Dreamy. You're so dreamy. So speaking of this Amber Emerald deck, let's get it on the screen. This comes from Calvin Harrigal. I believe that's the name. It's hard to see sideways and with natural handwriting, but this is the Amber Emerald aggro deck that we were talking about. The one thing that I want to point out is that it's making great use of like Lilo making a wish with the Simba Protective Cub package, like your normal aggressive Amber decks, and I think that leans very well, especially with Bodyguard, into playing some of those maybe weaker on stats Emerald characters like Flynn Rider, the 2-drop Charming Rogue, and it makes it so you actually just get to quest more aggressively in the early turns, and then when your opponent finally breaks through the Simba, then they still have the extra punish on top of having to make you discard, or like with Kuzco or Mad Hatter, having that extra layer of protection.
Yeah, my opponent actually even told me that he expected my deck to really tick up in popularity, which definitely happened at the event. And he was just coming just to mush me. And he did exactly that. He just ran me over.
Called shot. So the rest of the deck, we'll go over a little bit. I sent it to you in the Discord so you can take a peek at the physical list. The one card that always stands out to me as being relatively weak is Cheshire Cat Not All There. This is, a 3-cost inkable. It's great on that metric, right? But it quests for 2, and then if your opponent challenges it and banishes in combat, that character is banished as well. And what this does, it takes something down with it. It's kind of like a sinking, like a crocodile will pull you underwater as you come after him or whatever, right? And the problem though is that your opponent gets to choose which of their characters gets thrown under the bus, and the reward is just like not good enough. The body's not that big, the willpower's not that big, and there's no strength, and so you can't challenge your opponent's stuff. I would rather just play like a Mickey Mouse best friend or whatever, the amber thing that quests for 2 that's a 3-cost 3/3. And I'm sure that we're going to have much stronger things to put in these slots whenever we get a set or 2 more in the mix.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Cheshire Cat is a card that doesn't pivot well at all, right? You can't play defense with it in the slightest. It has 0 strength, so it can't challenge your opponent's characters well at all. And I think it is maybe a holdup from previous iterations of these decks where Maui was way more popular and present, and Cheshire Cat lines up really well against Maui, where the Maui's just going to have to trade with this 3-drop, which is actually really powerful. But right now, with how the metagame is, I'm thrilled when I see a Cheshire Cat because I can, send my Mr. Smee at it, and then also my Mickey Detective, and then I only lost a Mickey Detective.
Right. No, that's a great point. Yeah, just being able to pick and choose. The fact that so Cheshire Cat has a very similar punish as Kuzco Temperamental Emperor, where your opponent just chooses essentially the last character that they send into it is like a death march, right? And so you can choose to have your bigger characters do most of the damage, and then have your throwaway Mickey Detectives, your Grandma Talas, your Stitch New Dogs if you don't have Rockstar at the ready, stuff like that. And so I just don't like giving my opponent that much control over my side of the board. But I know that Emerald decks are often very successful, and it's specifically because of the high lore generators like Cheshire Cat. And so maybe there's just, something to be said about playing LeFou Bumbler and Flynn Rider Charming Rogue and Cheshire Cat and all these just like really, really weak characters on rate, but they just quest for a lot. And if you're just mixing that in with New Dog Rockstar kind of combo mid-rangey stuff, while also having Protective Cub, Simba Protective Cub to bodyguard in there, maybe this is the future of the aggro decks. Adding Leela Making a Wish to the Emerald package. It's kind of scary, man.
Yeah, actually, something I just was reminded of while we were talking about that was actually something I didn't even pick up on necessarily in our game in the top 8, was that a point for Cheshire Cat was I had a Maleficent uninvited that if it had been a Kuzco, I could just challenge the Kuzco and then throw my Mickey Detective into it. But because that Cheshire Cat only had 3 willpower, I would have to trade my Maleficent uninvited with the Cheshire Cat, which was a big deal. But if it had been a Mickey instead, I could just eat the Mickey with my Maleficent, and then my Rapunzel would have been on.
Right.
And I would have actually probably been in a really good spot, where Cheshire Cat having 0 strength, in some sense, might be actually a benefit against Rapunzel decks.
No, for sure. And I mean, there's all sorts of cool breakpoints for willpower with a lot of these cards, where the difference between 2 willpower and 3 willpower is an ocean, and then the difference between 3 willpower and 4 willpower is sometimes do or die, and there's just no real value you can put on the difference between a number and a slightly higher number, other than whatever context that the game gives you based on the matchup, your opponent's draws, the cards they're playing, and how you're defending against them, right? And like at some point, the game will hinge on 1 point of willpower one way or another regularly. And so, the higher your things like Cheshire Cat's willpower are, sometimes it's better, sometimes it's worse. Like in that situation, if it was an 04, it would be worse because of how it lines up specifically against your 5 drop. So a lot to consider there. Other than this Amber and Emerald deck that mushed you, though, was there any other decks in the top 8 that you wanted to discuss? I know Nathan Sawyer played a very similar, if not identical, deck to yours, right?
Yeah, I think he was 1 card different. He didn't have a 4th Rockstar, so he played an extra You Have Forgotten Me, I believe. But yeah, we had a pretty similar day. Nathan actually lost 2 mirror matches. He lost to Ramp twice.
Oh,
to
wow.
Amber Sapphire twice. Mm-hmm. Those were his 2 losses on the day. I lost to the aggro deck. There was a huge representation of pretty much everything at the event. We saw, Amber Sapphire and Amber Steel really rise to the top with a couple of aggro decks. But, I played against 5 different decks in my 5 matches that I played.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that was really cool to see. A lot of innovative takes, and it was also really cool to see that the people I played against, they had a plan when they were playing their deck. They weren't just showing up and saying, oh, yeah, I really like these colors, and this is what I had, and this is what I'm playing. They were like, no, I wanted to play against Amber Steel with this deck because of this reason, and that gives me an advantage in all of these situations. And that was really awesome to see.
So it sounds like we're already entering into advanced player territory in these smaller events, and it's going to make for some fun games of Lorcana, I guess.
Yeah. It was really cool meeting everybody. It was also interesting to me seeing, 3 people from the Invitational played in this 53-person event, and all 3 of us made it into top 8. Kurt actually didn't lose, but he had 2 unintentional draws. He won his other 4. Yeah, a lot of his games, especially the way he plays his deck, where, it's more combo focused, there's less pressure. So the games do tend to go a little bit longer, especially, if you're going to a game 3, it's pretty easy to run out of time. But between the 3 of us, we only lost 1 match in the Swiss. And, we come from a game like Magic that is the better players usually do well, right? It's not guaranteed, and it's a pretty high variance game overall. But with Lorcana, from what I've seen, it feels a lot lower variance than a game like Magic. And I think it's all tied to the ink system versus, missing your land drops in Magic.
I agree. I mean, one of the most fun, but also the most annoying things about Magic is drawing too many lands, not drawing enough lands, and then your game is, at some point you just run out of steam or you don't have enough in the first place. And the way Lorcana is built from the ground up is that most of your cards, at least in the first chapter, are inkable, so they count as resources. And so every single game, if you want to, you can go 1-drop, 2-drop, 3-drop, 4-drop. And then after that, it starts to get a little ticky-tacky, where you have to choose between inking an extra thing, trying to play 2 cards in the same turn, or just curving naturally up to 5 and 6. And so when you go up to 5, 6, 7, and you're curving the whole way, you'll naturally run out of cards. You'll just run out of runway on the 5th or 6th turn. And that's why cards like Friends on the Other Side can be so beneficial, and why Amethyst is one of the stronger colors, because it just has a lot of natural card draw. But also, It's one of the reasons why you see the aggressive decks have big refuel cards, because without those big refuel cards, as the game escalates into those 6, 7, 8, ninth turns, you don't have anything to do. And Stitch Rockstar, Whole New World, these were cards that I immediately identified as not only means of refreshing yourself, but also for just like pushing through tons of interaction from Ruby Amethyst and opposing steel decks. But they obviously come with downsides. Shifting puts you at a 2-for-1 disadvantage against spell removal sometimes, and Whole New World can backfire. And so you have to just walk the razor's edge. And, I think that Kurt's build is very cool for doing that with the 4 copies of Simba, Future King, but without Leela making a wish, he actually has difficult closing games. And physically closing the games means you're going to lead to a bunch of unintentional draws. At some point, I want to try tournaments that have best of 1, and we'll play like best of 1 with +2 rounds on the end of it, so we just get more physical games played. I think draws are really bad for this early, and I'm hoping that the boost in strength from Chapter 2 alleviates these issues completely and decks just win more quickly. But with new cards comes maybe more complexity, which means that like maybe games take longer because players jockey for position more often in the early turns. Just, I don't know.
Yeah, I definitely have noticed that the people who run out of time, with some exceptions, like I don't think Kurt's taking too long on his turns.
He played fast when I was watching him play.
I think a lot of it comes from inexperience with the cards. And as you get later in the event, the draws kind of fall off as people even get more experience throughout the day. A lot of the draws were early in the event versus later. And I think new cards definitely might help that, that additional power level, the games will get closed a little quicker. But I think as people play more and get more comfortable and more used to making these decisions, that inherently the games will go quicker as a result. And I really think that we can have matches conclude in 50 minutes pretty easily with this game because there is no shuffling.
I am not sold depending on the deck you're playing. I think that especially, if you go play on Pixelborn, you're going to probably play someone who has a lot of reps, and you're going to play a game in under 15 minutes pretty regularly. And that's great. But when you get to live play, the pace of play just grinds to a halt from most players. And I think that even the fastest players, though, will have trouble finishing some matches, and even while playing as fast as humanly possible, because of just the nature of the game. Like, you're never running out of stuff to do in some matchups. Your deck is built in such a way where you can protect yourself from multiple pressure points with Be Prepared, Maui, Monstrous Dragon, these things that slow your opponent down, take the wind out of their sails. And so, I watch too many Ruby Amethyst mirrors come down to decking to say that I think that 50 minutes is enough to finish a match. And if your argument is don't play that deck, that's not their fault. That's a fault of the engine. There is no mechanism that pushes the player towards finishing the match. And if it's advantageous long term to win a game by jockeying for position instead of questing, that's what you're going to do. And at the Invitational, there was a huge shift over the course of just the first day, watching players who ended up making it to this like top 4 finals. Those players would stop questing when it was ever dangerous. And then that would just naturally make the games go an extra 5 or 10 minutes, sometimes even longer. And when you play best of 3, that's just an extra 15 minutes added to every match. That's too much. Like, the games are just too long, and I think best of 1 might be the solve. That's all.
Yeah, potentially. I'm definitely down to continue having the conversation, especially as we get new cards, and we can always revisit this. Maybe we could even have this be a weekly segment.
Oh yeah, the Tandy says best of 1's the best. Best of 1.
Best of 1 versus best of 3. Let us know at home.
Yeah.
throw some comments down on the YouTube and let us know what you think. If you actually would want to be playing best of one tournaments, or if you want to stick to best of three, definitely let us know.
Yeah, please do. We're in our infancy in terms of running events and figuring out the best way to do things. And I don't think that we necessarily need to mimic other games. We can just do what's best for this game and this engine. But like I said, the next set is going to juice some stuff, and we might have games be done in 5 or 10 minutes pretty regularly when the cards are just stronger. Like, for example, the Pinocchio we were talking about earlier, the Quest for 3. That's just pretty scary, if you don't have a way to challenge it early, like, that thing might just run away with the game with a simple protective cub in front of it, man. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think I can be left alone in a room with Taryn Huck after
oh, he's gonna... Oh, man. Okay. So the Games and Comics Paradise Tournament, 53 players, won by Kurt Spies, playing Ember Steel Stitch Blitz, very similar to the list he played at the Lost Boys Lorcana Invitational. Harlan Fear top-aided, along with Nathan Stoyer. Congratulations to everyone who did well in that event.
Shout out to my boy and car mate, John Rummel. Also made top 8.
Nice. Congrats to him.
Playing Amber Steel.
And once again, I'd like to just say thank you to Games and Comics Paradise. They're a store out of Fairfax, Virginia. That's where this most recent event was held, at their home store. And thank you so much to them for sponsoring us. Make sure to check out gcparodice.com for all of your TCG needs, whether it's singles, accessories from Magic the Gathering, Yu-Gi-Oh!, Pokemon, and now Disney's Lorcana. gcparodice.com is your one-stop shop. Harlan, that's all I really got for this week, man. I was very excited to hear about your tournament experience this week, and I'm so glad you had fun.
Yeah, it was, again, I can't sing high enough praises. It was a blast. It was so much fun meeting everybody and getting to play Lorcana with a bunch of people. The closed tournaments are also fun because it's really intimate setting, and everybody has their absolute A game on. But it's also just fun to be in a big open field and just be able to bird a bunch of different matches and, root for your friends a little bit harder because they're not your immediate competition.
There's something really special about paper gaming. And if you've ever been to Gen Con or a board game convention of any kind, or even just been over to your friend's house on a rainy Sunday and just sat around for a few hours playing Ascension or Settlers of Catan, or God forbid you play Talisman, the game that ruined many a friendship of mine. Live gaming is fun because of the people. And when you get to go to an event with your friends and play against them even in top 8 sometimes, or playing for things that really matter, it just feels different than sitting in your house and playing against an unknown opponent on the other side of a computer screen. And I'm so glad that you got to experience that, and I can't wait to do more of that myself.
Yeah, definitely look forward to more of it. I know that Games and Comics Paradise will definitely be doing more. They had an awesome turnout, especially for the first one. It was a Sunday. I can't wait to see what they can do on the next one, and maybe have it on a Saturday, see what attendance can be like,
All right. Well, that's going to wrap up this week's episode of the Lost Boys podcast. Make sure to follow us on our social media. We are Lost Boys LOR on Twitter, Patreon, YouTube, and that's about it, I think. Make sure, if you have any questions for Harlan for next week's Ask Harlan Anything, make sure to post them down in the comments below. Show us what decks from Chapter 2 you're working on. We'd love to see some brews, and maybe if we like your brews, we will play them in one of our next few episodes of Lost Boys Versus. I'm Tandy, and that's Harlan, and we're the Lost Boys. Say bye, Harlan.
Bye, Harlan.